If you look at this chart, we have been in the danger zone, if you will, over the Nifty 50 since 2016.
Yep.
That's what the argument's going to be.
I understand it. I completely understand it.
So what do
Now,
you think makes this time in which we live right now different than 2016, 17, 18? Why is there a catalyst now, do you think?
well, there's a the first point I'd come back to is over time. We know this from reading history and from looking at stock markets going back hundreds of years. The way you make money is to buy low and sell high. That's
Mm.
just, this is undisputed. Now, we can argue that this can go higher, right? That's possible. I would look, the true test of asymmetry is something where you have relatively low risk and relatively high reward.
Right.
So I'm not making a call here. I don't think we have to make a call and say that this is a bubble that's going to burst. We don't have to make that call. What we have to do is say, okay, I don't want to be there. Right? First step, get out of the way of something that looks risky. Fine. Don't own these things. Now, where do you place your capital? If we look at the other side of that particular coin and we look at energy, as I mentioned before, and we saw the cash flows, the free cash flow with respect to the energy sector, what has that sector done since 2016, 2017, 2018? Well, guess what? It's done well. We've not lost money. So we've managed to get through this period, which is where it's gone from risky to extremely risky, and we haven't lost money. The only thing we've lost is we've lost out on the gains if we were invested into the Magnificent Seven. That's the only thing, and that is the greed. That's the Chanos shutting down his fund, throwing in the towel. That is the Druckenmiller. If you remember Druckenmiller back in
I think 2012, didn't he? Shut down his fund then?
no, I remember he got out of the market and then he watched it go up higher and higher for like 2 months, and then he went, stuff it, and he went back in, and that year he lost $4 billion. And that's Druck.
Right.
Right? He's not a retail schmuck. He knows what he's doing, but it can get anybody caught out. And what he needed to do was what he knew. He knew it was risky. He knew it was dangerous. But
Chris, I want to put this chart into as simple terms as I possibly can. And I'm looking at the Microsoft versus energy sector. So let's just think about this for a moment here. If I asked the viewer, would you rather have 135 billion a year, or would you rather have 67 billion a year? That's a pretty easy question. But then it's one of those, oh, wait, there's more. Would you rather have 135 billion or 167 billion, but the 135 billion is half the price? That's what we're dealing with right now.
That's it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
It is literally as simple as that. And again, it doesn't mean that the 3.1 trillion doesn't go to 3.2, 4, 5, some other number higher. And it doesn't mean that the energy sector suddenly goes from 67 to 70 or 80. Maybe it stays at 67. Maybe it even goes to 65. But again, if you come back and you look at since like 2016, we haven't lost. It is continued to be profitable. What that tells me is that most of the hands that are holding that are strong hands. That's what it tells me.
Yeah, they're like Bitcoin hodlers.
Exactly. And it's because they're they're weirdos like me who sit there and go, I'm not selling this stuff. It's printing money. Why would I?
Right.
And it's not rocketing higher while I'm sitting watching the Magnificent Seven go up, and every day Nvidia prints another 5 points. I'm like, okay. So that is, in my book, the trade to make, largely broadly.
Chris, before we go on, let me kind of give my take on that question I asked you as to why we could be at a moment in time that's different than 2018, 2016, 17, 18, and why there may be a catalyst. You said earlier that in your experience through these cycles, at a certain point, people just run out of money. There's no more money. And what they do is they go from allocating capital, and then once they run out of capital, then they start putting on leverage, which is what you pointed out with this U.S. pension fund taking on 1.5 trillion of additional risk through leverage because they just don't have any more in the coffers. So they've got to go out and borrow more. So if I'm hearing you right, the move to where we are right now in the Mag 7 or any move higher would likely be dependent on leverage, which in my mind is dependent on the banking system. And then what I do is I look at Silicon Valley Bank, I look at First Republic, I look at Signature, I look at Credit Suisse, I look at the problems that they're having with UBS, I look at New York Community Bank, I look at the regionals tanking, I look at the problems with their balance sheets due to commercial real estate, among many other things. And then I look at the credit growth that we've had, which has been no growth. It's been pretty much flat because the banks see a lot of risk out there, understandably
They don't want to lend.
And so they look at the yield curve, they look at all these things. And so I'm sitting there looking at a banking system that wants to lend a lot less, meaning they want to provide a lot less leverage. Therefore, that could be the catalyst that could mean that the taps are run dry, and therefore the next move down is not just taking the stairs down, but taking the elevator down.
There are many catalysts. That's one of them. And then if we look on the sovereign balance sheet side of things, the absolutely staggering amount of new debt that has been added to this thing. So largely what we've been talking about up until this point has been fairly US centric, shall we say. So we're looking at the markets in the US. But remember, nothing happens in a vacuum. And so the construct of that market is still largely, to some degree, dependent on other nations holding US debt, which then, of course, affects the interest rates. And then that has a flow-on effect into the banking system. And there's an interplay between how those all function. But the point is that we have not only the problems in the credit system within the US that you've alluded to, but we've got massive problems in the sovereign debt markets. And while we're at that, we're going into a time of geopolitical conflict. So if you're a nation at war, you do not want to be owning or holding the debt of another nation that you're at war with. That's just logical. That's what we're facing. So, you talk about catalysts. I don't know what those catalysts could be, but we don't need to even make that judgment call. We know that they're out there. There are these events, and they look increasingly probable daily. But again, we don't have to even make that judgment call and say, oh, well, this is going to happen when, and I need to time it. No. All you need to know is what's dangerous and stay the hell away from it, and then try and position yourself for something which, on a relative basis, provides you with protection and potential upside. What you need to look at is basic good old supply and demand and Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Look at what is absolutely critical. In a fake world, we've got fake TV, fake news, fake money. Nothing matters more than real goods, real stuff. The power that you turn on, the food that you eat, the gasoline you put in your car. These are real hard issues which, they will always come to the fore. You look through historical periods, that's what happens. I don't see why this would be any different.